Right. Dear students, let me give additional informations, and would you please mute first your sounds? Okay. So I would like to remind you again, in the previous meeting, we discussed about the 6 characteristics of communicative language teaching. And don't forget this concept, because this concept will affect your understanding to the next part of this chapter. Right. As we know that communicative language teaching has 6 characteristics. The first one is communicative language teaching, or CLT, designing classroom goals for mastering communicative competence. I think I have delivered to you about the communicative competence, and hopefully you still keep in your mind about what communicative competence is. So CLT is designed for its classroom to help the students to master communicative competence. That's the first things. And the second characteristic is engaging students to language techniques such as pragmatic, authentic, functional use of language for meaningful purposes. So we also have discussed about this. And the third one is fostering students to their fluency and accuracy. CLT provides students to improve, to develop the students for their fluency and their accuracy. So this is not a choice, but this is a must, the two things, fluency and accuracy. And the fourth one, the characteristic of communicative language teaching is engaging students to use productive and receptive skills. Engaging students to use productive and receptive skills. I also have discussed with you what productive skill is and what receptive skill is, and what is the elements of productive skill from the 4 English skills, and why these 2 skills are called as productive skill, and why these 2 skills are called as receptive skills. I think we have discussed that, and hopefully you still keep in your mind about this. And the fifth one is giving students opportunity for autonomous learning. So autonomous learning is provided in the CLT class by letting students to study about the language based on their learning styles, because this is it provides students for autonomous learning. And the last characteristic is encouraging students to construct meaning. In this case, we need to understand as the role of teacher, where teacher in communicative language teaching is or should act as facilitator and guide. Teacher is not the one who knows everything. Teacher is not the one who knows everything. Okay. So from these 6 characteristics of communicative language teaching, and then there is something that we to understand after knowing the characteristic of communicative language teaching. What we are discussing this morning, delivered by the group, is actually still about communicative language teaching, but this is more practical way. So don't think that all the 6 things that have been delivered by the groups are an approach. No, they are not an approach, but they call it as an instructions and the characteristics. So I will say demethodologizings or viewpoints of communicative language teaching. So for the demethodologizing of viewpoint of communicative language teaching, the book explain the 6 things, 6 point or 6 characteristics, another 6 characteristic or another few of point, how to implement of communicative language teaching in the classrooms. The first is learner-centered instructions. So we use the word instructions. Yeah, we use the word instructions. The instructions in the classrooms, if you use communicative language teaching, it should be centered to learner, not teacher-centered, but learner-centered. The focus of learning activity is a learner. The focus of teaching activity is not a teacher. As we have discussed in the previous meeting or at the beginning of my presentation, the role of teacher as a facilitator and a guide. So because the role of teacher as a facilitator or a guide, then the classroom is learner-centered instructions. Okay, so what is the characteristic of learner-centered instructions? If you read in the book, at least there are 5 an activity that we need to understand. The first one is techniques that focus on or account for learners' need, for learner style, and for learning goals. So the first point, when it is learner-centered, actually the implementation of the classroom, the teacher should facilitate the learner's needs. Of course, the need here is the need of learning, not the need of other things, but the need of learning. The teacher should facilitate the student's learning style. As we know, the student's learning style may be in the form of visual learners, auditory learners, or kinesthetic learners. And the last is the teacher should facilitate the students based on the learner's goal. What is the goal of learning this? The teacher should compromise what the curriculum say about the goals and what the students need to have after learning the process. That's learning-centered instructions. Another characteristic for learner-centered instruction is techniques that give some control to the students, group work or strategy training, for example. Curricula that include the consultations and input of students and that do not presuppose objective in advance. So there should be communications between school and students as the subject of learning to implement the curriculum. So we cannot deliver the materials mandated by the government to students without having any communications before with the students. This is if we implement the learner-centered instructions. The fourth one is techniques that allow for students creativity and innovations. Creativity and innovations is the activity should be done in the classrooms. If you remember, according to David Noonans in 1991, in the eclectic approach, no method for all. But as a teacher, think about the classroom task and classroom activity. And the techniques and the classroom tasks and the classroom activities should provide the students for creativity and innovations. Okay, for creativity and innovations. And the last one is technique that enhance students' sense of competence and self-worth. So once again, learner-centered instructions is not an approach, but this is the instructions of implementing communicative language teaching in the classrooms. So the communicative language teaching with the 6 characteristics, starting from the classroom goals, the technique used in the classrooms, the role of teachers, the use of productive and receptive skills, and autonomous learners should be implemented in the classroom by having the learner-centered instructions. Without implementing learner-centered instructions, you cannot, as a teacher, implement the communicative language teaching itself. So this is not approach. All the activity using the word instructions. The meaning instruction in bahasa Indonesia is pembelajaran. It's not instruksi, yeah. And instructions mean pembelajaran. Okay. The next one is, or the second one, viewpoint or demythologizing of communicative language teaching is cooperative and collaborative learning. If you criticize this, if you are critical enough, if you are a critical reader, you will ask to yourself, or you will ask the presenter, or the presenter can provide what is cooperative and collaborative learning. Is it the same? Are they the same, or are they different? Is cooperative learning the same as collaborative learning? Or is cooperative learning different from collaborative learning? Because nobody asked that, maybe you have understood about the concepts of cooperative and collaborative learning. But if you're critical enough, you may ask and discuss this. Cooperative learning and collaborative learning. But basically, cooperative and collaborative learning, this is not individual learning. Basically, cooperative and collaborative learning is not individual learning, but this is a group activity or pair activity. Group activity or pair activity with some principles, Cooperative learning has its own principles, and collaborative learning has its own principles. If you ask me whether this is the same or this is different, I have two answers. Many experts believe that the terms of collaborative and cooperative learning are the same. But some other experts concerns that cooperative and collaborative learning are different. But not to include in that debates, let's understand first the concepts that cooperative and collaborative learning is the implementations of communicative language teaching itself. This is not another approach. Cooperative and collaborative learning is not another approach, but this is the implementation of communicative language teaching. So communicative language teaching with the 6 characteristics should be implemented in the classroom. One of the implementation is using cooperative and collaborative learning to accommodate the characteristic number 5. What is the characteristic number 5 of CLT? That is autonomous learners. To implement the autonomous learner, so the classroom activity should be learner-centered instructions. And one of the learner-centered instructions applications in the classrooms, the teacher may have cooperative and collaborative learning. So that I will say, cooperative and collaborative learning are a methods. Cooperative and collaborative learning have so many techniques. If you look at the book, cooperative and collaborative learning are different from group activity. But this is a structured group activity. That's different. What's the difference? If we have a group activity, maybe it may happen in the classroom, the students are not mandated to do an activity based on their responsibility. But in cooperative and collaborative learning, the teacher assign every student in their groups, assign everyone in the group to do the tasks that the task rely or affects to other students. It means that if you miss or if you are lazy, you are not coming to your responsibility, so other students will not understand the material because other students missing one explanations, and one explanation is mandated to one student that is not coming to the class. So individual responsibility. If you are not coming to the class, in one cases you have responsibility to deliver that material. But if you are not coming, so other students will not understand because the material is not discussed yet. Because this is your responsibility to deliver in class, but you are not coming, so the other students will not understand that because of you. So this is cooperative and collaborative learning. It's different from group work as usual. If you have a group work as usual, it is possible to have one student dominates the classroom, the activity. It's possible one student to dominate the classroom, the group activity, but not in cooperative and collaborative learning. It is impossible one student to dominate the activity in a group. Why? Because the teacher assigned everyone to have an activity to complete one to another. So this is cooperative and collaborative learning. And this is method and the technique, the implementation in the classrooms, for example, or something like jigsaw activity. Jigsaw activity, if you ever heard these terms, in the jigsaw activity, we have an expert group and we have the meeting of the experts. Everyone in the group are active. Everyone in the group is active. None of the students in the group not active. So everyone should be active in the group. Why? Because when there is one student not active in the groups, it will affect to the whole class. It will affect to another students in that group. So this is the principle, one of the principles of cooperative learning, that is individual responsibility. Individual responsibility. Right. Still related to this, learner-centered instructions and cooperative and collaborative learning, another viewpoint of communicative language teaching is that interactive learning. Interactive learning, once again, interactive learning can be done using cooperative and collaborative learning. Interactive learning can be done using cooperative and collaborative learning. But interactive learning is not only applied in cooperative and collaborative learning. But this is a viewpoint in communicative language teaching to implement the 6 characteristics that the classroom, to be able as students to master communicative competence, the classroom should be interactive. What is the meaning of interactive here? Interactive means two-way communications between teacher and students. It's not one-way communications. It's not only from teacher explaining to the class, but there is an interactive between, there is a dialogue, there is conversations about the material between teacher and students or among the students themselves. Another terms, so this is what interrelated to another, the same things as a whole language educations. Whole language educations. In the whole language educations, there is a principle here actually. Two, if you look at the characteristic, there are two characteristics here on page 49, how whole language education is called democratic, is called diverse society. How to engage the students to use the language to construct meaning and to construct reality. Language enables learners to understand a system of social practices that both constrains and liberate. So part of your job as a teacher is to empower learners to liberate themselves from whatever social, political, and economic forces constraints to the learners. The whole language education is how the students can use the language both in class and can use the language outside the classrooms. The same thing when we learn about English, it's not only used in the classroom, but how can we use the language, English in this case, outside the classrooms. So this is more principles once again to implement the communicative language teaching. So in whole language education, that is an interactive learning. In whole language educations, explain about the learner-centered instructions. In the whole language educations can also implement cooperative and collaborative learning. Right. The next one is content-based instructions. Content-based instructions. Basically, we can understand these terms. The teaching of learning English teaching and learning using a content, using contents. The purpose is not to study about the language, but the purpose is to understand about the material, but the language instructions is using English, is using English. If you still remember, in the year of 2000s, 2005, 2006, 2007, if you still remember, Indonesians educations at that times implemented what it's called uh, international standardized school, if you still remember. International standardized school, sekolah berstandar international, sekolah bertaraf international. In that case, in that times, if you enter to the classrooms, if you enter to the school where one of the class or some of the classes implements the international standardized schools, the teacher and the students use English to study about the subject matters in that school. The presenter just now explained something like studying about geography. Studying about geography using English. The point is not to study about English, but the point is studying geography using English. That's content-based instructions. Something like us today, this morning. So this is also one of the implementation of content-based instructions. Our learning activity, we are not studying English skills, right? Today, we are not studying English skills, but the language that we use is English. The content of material is about the methodologizing or viewpoint of communicative language teaching. To explain, to discuss about this, we use English. So this is called content-based instructions. Of course, the students and also the teacher should master English first. Should master English first before coming to the class. How can you understand about the content of the subject if you cannot use the language? That's the questions. How can you understand about the material from this book if your English is not enough, is not proficiency enough? So content-based instructions, there is a requirements for teacher and students in the classroom should master at least communications or conversations of English. I back to the history of Indonesia when implemented the international standardized school. The mathematics teacher teach mathematics using English. The history teacher teach history using English. The geography teacher teach English using English. Teach geography using English. So when that happens, this is called content-based instructions. You may implement this to develop your English skills. Something like you have an English conversation club, you discuss about something else, not only about English, but you discuss something else. Let's say you discuss about juvenile delinquency. You discuss about the condition of politics in Indonesia. You discuss about the culture, Indonesian culture. You discuss about Indonesian's educational systems. You discuss about the local culture. All your discussions using English. If you do that, so your activity is called content-based instructions. The same thing as the last one, number 6, task-based instructions. What is the difference? Actually, this is the same, but content-based is focused on the content. You're studying subject matter using English, and task-based instruction is related to the task. All the tasks of any subject using English, that task-based instructions. For example, you ask your students to interview people in their home, but you ask your students to interview the people using English. This is task-based instructions. Okay, the interview is not about studying English, but it is the implementation of using the language with the parents. To end the presentations, I would like to say and have some revisions to your presentations and also your understanding. Probably this is not approach. The 6 things is not approach, but this is the viewpoint or the methodologizations of implementing communicative language teaching in the classrooms. So when implementing the 6 characteristics of CLT in the classrooms, remember about your teaching activity should be learner-centered. Remember about your teaching activity should be interactive learning. Your activity may use cooperative and collaborative learning. Your activity in the classroom can use content-based instructions. Your activity in the classroom, you may use task-based instructions. That's the explanation from this book. Hopefully you get some understanding and some insights about the communicative language teaching in general and how to implement the communicative language teaching in the classrooms. Right. I think that's all. If you have a question, so